Our application is now all finished up and deployed, so I want to finish this section out by just doing a quick review of some really important topics that we covered. Okay, so in this diagram, I got a lot of information. I'm just going to give you some high-level notes. You can always pause the video and take a look at some of the notes on here in greater detail if you want to. So by this time, you've probably kind of figured out that Angular is all about its terminology. There's a lot of different things floating around, and they all behave just somewhat differently. So these are the big important things that we're going to walk away from this section with. First off, we spoke about component templates. Remember, those are the files that contain all the HTML that gets displayed to a user. We also had our component class file that contains all the code that is ran anytime some event is triggered. All the methods and different properties of that class can also be referenced inside of specific pieces of syntax inside of our template as well. Next up, inside of our template, we saw examples of property binding. We use that property binding thing anytime that we want to set a property on an HTML element. Remember, property binding makes use of the square brackets, and anything inside of those double quotes that goes with the property binding is evaluated as code. Once again, anything inside those double quotes can also reference any method or property on our component class instance. We also saw event binding, which made use of the parentheses instead. We saw interpolation, which is how we print out information inside of a template. So with interpolation, we can also, once again, access any property or method on our component class instance by just writing out the name inside of those double curly braces. And then finally, we saw structural directives. Remember, a structural directive is going to change the structure of HTML inside of our template in some way. We made use of the ngIf structural directive. There are several others that are included with Angular just right out of the box that we're going to use over time, but we can also create our own directives if we want to. There are also attribute directives, which we discussed very briefly, but we haven't used just yet. And so I did not just put them on this diagram because technically we haven't really looked at them in great detail. All right, so that's the big overview on everything that we covered inside this section. Now we still have obviously a tremendous amount to learn about Angular, so let's start working on our next application in just a moment.